if we focus the spotlight so much on the figure of Nancy, we do things like overlook her daughter, Christine, who is waiting in the wings to likely follow her mother's footsteps into the seat if Nancy is successful in engineering a special election of the sort that favored her when she won her seat back in 1987. And, it's the corruption here is at least multi-generational within a family, and then it's institutional across a caucus. And I fear that the folks who are going to be wielding the gavel in her wake will leave us. The one thing I will say in their credit is they're not already fantastically wealthy. But, let's fast forward that tape and see how that goes in a few years. If the insider trading thing is in lockdown. Could I actually say one thing when you were talking about Sam Bankman-Fried? I don't want to say specifically about him, but the figure that came to mind when you're talking about that kind of layer of individuated corruption and the complicity of figures in DC, including Nancy Pelosi, the figure it brought to my mind, and for me, is our former president. And the charade that so many people participated in, pretending that she was attempting to hold him accountable through an impeachment process that she delayed for months,
of course,
and then affirmatively limited so that specifically what would not come up in the articles of impeachment was anything related to self-enrichment. Why, you might ask? Because she's up to her own neck in it. And so the constitutional cost that we, the people, have paid because of the co-optation of that particularly pivotally situated, equally corrupt, ultimately conservative figure is incalculable. Yet journalists who are theoretically the guardians of the store, the people with a supposed professional commitment to ethics, transparency, accountability, they're nowhere to be found. It's almost like someone's been robbing the bank for decades in plain sight, and the cops are like rolling up the red carpet and bringing them champagne. And I just, I don't.
We know why, though. I mean, the same people that own Nancy Pelosi are the same people that own our media. So
corporations more than people, but I'm with you. Yeah,
that's what I mean. Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, no, I know they're corporations. That's what I mean. It's wait. So she's beholden to those corporations, and those are the same corporations that are. Why would they like? It's all the same thing. So and I think that people don't realize. Like, I very much ran for the same reason. I wish that my representative was not a corporate whore. I do. I wish that. Like, I wish that she were even just, like she was just sitting there. Like, we had one that was in a district north of us, nice enough guy, harmless, whatever. And, like someone like that. But no, she's filthy, like in the most ridiculous way, with the most like obvious appearance of impropriety. It's conflicts of interest all over the place. And so it's like, what else are you going to do? But like I wish you weren't like that. And then I wouldn't have ever thought to do that. Right. It's not like fun thing to do.
Right. Yeah. I think you and I both encountered this. There's at least some number of trolls who would characterize us as ambitious when ultimately we were people who were sort of driven to step into the line of fire because we couldn't bear to watch from a sideline. And, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of all of us who've run to challenge entrenched incumbents and the work that we've done. I just got off the phone maybe an hour ago with Matthew Ho in North Carolina, Green Party Senate candidate who I've been inspired by, and I think all of us have had such disturbingly parallel experiences from the emergence of weaponized lies in race after race after race. As it's another thing I talk about, not in the Substack article you were talking about, but I think one or two ago that I published, Democrats versus Democracy, I think was the title of that one. But I talk in that piece, it reflects on Ryan Grimm, who the DC bureau chief at The Intercept. He had a pair of long form pieces in the last 6 months. And so I sort of respond to those and fill in the gaps that he declines to state, despite sort of observing the perimeters around these gaps. And just the presence of what I will, for lack of a better set of terms, chalk up to identitarian hypocrisy. You've got a Democratic Party that relies on communities of color, on LGBTQ communities for support, while in Western Massachusetts running a homophobic campaign to neutralize Alex Morris, while in San Francisco waging an Islamophobic campaign to neutralize me, while in Ohio waging a campaign characterizing Nina as an angry Black woman was the term that a particular figure at a PR agency SKDK. This is an agency that represents
SKDK or SKD Knickerbockers. The term, and that's Anita Dunn and Hillary Rosen.
That's exactly right. Hillary Rosen is the person I'm thinking of, who apologized publicly for smearing Nina Turner. And this is the same firm that represents Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi.
But she's not really sorry. Let's be honest.
No, that's the same woman who told Nina that she didn't have standing to quote Dr. King. And I was sitting there watching that video, and I'm looking at Nina and I'm like, oh, this woman, like the grace of this woman.
A lot of nerve.
Oh, for someone that looks like Hillary Rosen to say that, it was jaw dropping.
Sure. Wow. And I actually remember texting Nina shortly thereafter and just saying, I don't know how you kept it together, but you had every reason to literally cut her throat in that moment, and you didn't do it. I don't know. You would have had carte blanche to go after her, because that was the
you
white
didn't see liberal, that, Shahid. You didn't see that.
White moderate liberal living in, the San Francisco Bay Area, who thinks that they are the most dangerous racist in society because they're considered untouchable. But in this case, she decided to do it in a way that, Nina, I could tell Nina was shocked by it. But you know what? How shocking should it be? I know people who have said
the woman has grace. Let me tell you. I would have lost my shit with that one. There is just, I couldn't believe it. But yet that's what she said.
Bigotry is worse in the Democratic side than in the Republican side, because in the Republican side, it's right in your face.
Right.
If there's somebody who is waving a Confederate flag and saying, may the South rise again, you at least know where that person stands. They're not hiding anything. They're very transparent about it. But somebody who's on the liberal side, who believes in, if we only could take care of these poor brown and black people. But the truth is, they don't want them anywhere near your neighborhoods. They don't want them anywhere near your schools.
Right.
And they certainly don't want them anywhere near their kids if they're in the dating age. So
there's a lot of Black Lives Matter sign in the window.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
It doesn't actually translate into tangible policy results that will actually will fix the problem. And that is all that really matters. And that is essentially where this movement kind of stands right now, because in many ways it's kind of rudderless. And there's a lot of people who have a lot of egos, particularly in the non-corporate progressive political lane, where we're constantly trying to figure out, how are we going to do this, let's say post-Bernie, if you will. I mean, from Jen and my perspectives, this is all about labor and how we unite the workers of this country. And there's a lot of people who are workers in this country who can be as left as Bernie Sanders and as right as Donald Trump. But they agree on a living wage. They agree on universal health care. They agree on a clean environment. They agree on criminal justice reform. And they agree on ending these senseless wars. And if we can bring, which mostly falls into the category of what I consider to be probably progressive left and libertarian.
It's populist. It's populist.
Yeah. We got a friend Metaopoly in the chat who's definitely, a Trump supporter, if you will. But
although he's sick of them too.
Yeah, but agrees with a lot of these policies. And so to me, I believe firmly that the only way we're really going to change this narrative as we go forward, because the system's falling apart. I think everybody recognizes that at this point. What do we do to actually steer the course correctly? I think it's through labor combined with the environmental movement. Your thoughts on that as we close the conversation?
I don't think we ultimately have a choice around how the narrative gets set. We organize in all of our different communities. And frankly, we hope anyone pays attention is sort of how I've always done it. And I absolutely agree with you about the centrality of labor. It's one reason why, frankly, if I lean too hard on that analysis, I would jump off a bridge, because labor has been thoroughly co-opted and weaponized against itself. There's a new wave of labor agitation happening and new organizing. Amazon, Starbucks come to mind. That's inspiring expansion of unions. And in the case of Amazon, it's an entirely new independent union, free of the corporately co-opted unions of the past. And so that to me is very exciting. The expansion of unions that are ultimately beholden to corporate bosses, like the ones here in San Francisco, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing, but I am, very excited about the ALA. Certainly, I'm excited about the generational consciousness around labor that's emerging. I ultimately don't think, narrative wins it for us. At the end of the day, what wins it is how many people show up to do a thing. And, I've witnessed so many unfortunate collective action dilemmas, so many careers get traded for movement principles. So many organizations get co-opted. So many journalists get rolled. I've sort of, to be perfectly frank with you, lost my faith in electoral democracy. I don't see a lot of hope for this country. And another way to put that is it's not just that our neighbors are ignorant. The ignorance is institutionally enforced. And that to me is terrifying. I mean, it's like a scenario out of a science fiction movie. And I don't think many Americans understand how thickly the veil has fallen over what they are permitted to see. No example of this to me rings more clearly than neither of the two Substack articles that we've mentioned, but a different one, I talk about Julian Assange and the idea that the press corps can witness a publisher being prosecuted, bipartisan prosecution, for the crime of revealing state secrets, including the military killing of Reuters journalists, and that not a single American editor or publisher has been even let their readers know it's happening when their own interests are at stake, when their own capacity to perform their constitutional function is at stake. And the press is entirely out to lunch. I contrast this with in the Vietnam era, when the Pentagon Papers were released, I think it was 17 newspapers around the country. There were that many independent vectors of ownership at the time, but they organized one after the other. The Justice Department got injunctions to stop. First, I think it was the Washington Post, from printing the classified secret analysis about the truth of the war in Vietnam and how everything from the Gulf of Tonkin forward that the American people had been told was a lie, kind of like the war in Afghanistan many years later. When the Washington Post got shut down, they handed them off to the Baltimore Sun, and they passed them off to the New York Times, and they passed them off to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and it went around the country, and the Pentagon Papers got published, and the American people got to read what not a single publisher in the country would print today. And I just find that structural erosion of the press and its institutional capacity to enable transparency it should be alarming to anyone. I think the only reason it's not, it's sort of the analogy of the frogs getting boiled in water, but like the water in America is boiling, and what passes for democracy here, I think I fear past a breaking point. It continues to stagger on with a veneer of legitimacy to people who don't look too carefully. But, when I look at everything from, the role in money in politics, it's interesting that people don't even talk about that frontally anymore, even though it's like an open subversion of democracy by capitalism. And then, you add to it these layers of demagoguery, the lies that we confront in our respective races, the leveraging and reinforcement of stereotypes, the role of militarism in the background here. When you talked about Hillary Rosen trying to lecture Nina about quoting Dr. King, his intersecting evil speech has always rung very clearly in my mind. And to think of what we've done in this country with the intersecting evils, just wrapped ourselves more thoroughly around all of them. And, the militarism, the racism, the capitalism, all of them define American public policy to a far greater extent than any conception of the public interest or what working Americans need. And the fact that that's bipartisan, the fact that Democrats in leadership under, again, Nancy Pelosi, whose announcement sort of brought us together today, have not articulated or demonstrated a meaningfully different pole in that debate. We could go back to like Build Back Better and that whole dance, and it's at the end of the day, it's all rhetorical. What hits the floor is what passes and what the president signs into law, and it's meager. I look at Biden's legacy, and I would just say my last closing thought is I think it's imperative that Democrats field a candidate to Biden's left to primary him and push him out. If he is the candidate in 2024, I fear all the things that Democrats, wave in people's faces to get them to care about the process, Trump this, Trump that. Biden can't beat him again.
No.
I fear.
But I don't think anybody can on the Democratic side. So I don't think that.
I think right now, at this point right now, I think if I'm a betting person, especially because the GOP had 5 million more votes in this midterm election, that's one thing no one wants to talk about. Right. They had 5 million more votes than the Democrats did. If that's not a massive red flag for the 2024 election, and the way the Democrats are playing it right now, it's almost a guarantee that either Trump or DeSantis is the next president.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.